Nobody owns me, though.
Hey.
How you doing, baby? That's because I own my own company, and my company sells a product that's better than the competition at a price that's lower than the competition.
Well, what we selling here, Frank?
Okay, right on now. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen. It's a show where we talk about movies. Specifically, we talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, a.k.a. TV's Travis. This is episode number 233, and our movie this week is 2007's American Gangster. Joining me to talk about it, he'd never seen it before, from Horseshoes and Hand Grenades, and Those Were the Days, it's Steven. Steven, how you doing?
Well, hello, TV's Travis. Thank you for having me this evening. Boy, oh boy, am I excited to talk about this movie.
Awesome.
I just, you know what? We haven't talked in a while, and it's just good to see you, mainly. That's the thing.
Yeah, it's been, 2 weeks, I think.
It's
since
been
we
a hot
talked.
minute.
But
Yeah.
but it's been a long 2 weeks because you were at Dragon Con in the middle of those 2 weeks, and
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff has happened. So, American Gangster, directed by Ridley Scott, starring Denzel Washington, Russell Crowe, came out in 2007. What, if any, history did you have with this movie?
I remember seeing the trailer of this movie, and like many movies, I go, that looks awesome, and I need to see it. And then it came, and it went, and I did not get the opportunity. and I don't know why I never went back. It's you know me. We've talked about this a bunch of times. Like, a movie gets past the zeitgeist, and then I'm like, I should watch that. And it takes someone physically sitting me down in front of the TV and going, you're watching this today. I mean, it took me like 20 years to watch Fargo, for crying out loud. Like, I need someone to make me do it. And that's what happened here. You said, I need a guest. I said, here's 850 movies I haven't seen, and we picked one. And this is where we are. But yeah, I love Denzel. I love Russell Crowe. I love Ridley Scott. I love everybody I didn't know was in this movie that ended up being in this movie. I have no idea what's wrong. Yeah.
Well, it happens. I did the same thing as you when the trailer hit. I was like, ooh, I'm a see that one. And I did. I actually went and saw this in the theater, and I adored it as soon as I saw it in the theater. I'm a big Ridley Scott fan, always have been. So that was like, all right, there's selling point number one. Denzel. All right, you had me at Ridley Scott, but great. Denzel Washington. Russell Crowe working with Ridley Scott again. Well, you keep giving me more reasons to see this movie. And then I go and I see it, and it's just like, I came out of the theater. I'm like, first of all, didn't feel like a 2.5 hour, movie at all. And secondly, I was like, that was amazing. I want to watch it again. I ended up not seeing it again in the theater, but I adored this movie. So it was kind of, for me, it was real fun to revisit. And like you, I forgot how many other recognizable faces pop up in this thing. I mean, this is a cast. So Denzel and Russell Crowe, big names, and you're going to get good performances out of them, because even in like less than great movies that either one of them have been in, which is pretty rare for these two, but they never have a bad performance. You never, like, even a bad Russell Crowe performance, he's still bringing something to it, and he's trying. Denzel is Denzel. That guy just oozes cool.
Yeah. And let's not forget, this isn't the first time these two have danced. Because
true.
you want to talk about bad performances or bad movies? Virtuosity was the first time these two were together. And though I have seen that movie, Travis, and loved the Jesus out of it when I did see it, it is not a good film. It is subjectively bad. But these two, they never phone it in, anything they're ever in. Like, they're selling it.
I just, if I could have 1% of the swagger that Denzel Washington brings to a film role, just 1% of it, like, there's nothing he does that you're just not like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And then he can turn around, he can flip right around and stare a dagger through you, where you just feel like you're about 3 inches tall. I mean, it's amazing.
he and Samuel L. Jackson are on a similar plane, but Denzel takes the drama side of that like way higher. Like the actual. Now I'm not knocking Samuel L. Jackson's acting prowess; they're both phenomenal. But there's
Mhm.
something about Denzel, the way he carries himself, but then his aggression, just it scares you. Like I'm used to Samuel L. Jackson staring at me. Like all I can
Mhm.
think about is that Black Snake Moan gif where he's just like
Yeah.
staring through. Like I'm afraid. But Denzel, I'm like more afraid because I've seen him gentle. You know what I mean? Like it's
You have, and they both can yell really well. Now, no one yells like Sam Jackson. Like he's on he's playing a different game. Him and Gene Hackman are like 1 and 1A when it comes to actors that can yell. Denzel can do that, but the thing that makes Denzel, when he goes angry, scary is that he gets quiet. When he shuts down and gives you those daggers, and you're just like, please don't hurt me. Please don't
I'm really
just
sorry.
leave me in a body bag, on the side of the road. It's
For
amazing.
me to hurt me thick and totally, not like don't do little stuff. Just end it.
Yeah, and to this movie's credit, they give you that right off the bat. Like the first thing you see is him light a cigar and then throw the match on a guy covered in gasoline and just light him on fire and empty a revolver into him, and that's the opening shot of the movie. I was like, whoa!
Yeah.
I had forgotten about that totally. I was like, damn, this movie goes hard right from the beginning.
Yeah, they're setting you up. My jaw dropped, and all I could really think was, man, I'm glad he at least shot him 6 times because that's just sitting there burning would suck.
Oh, yeah, it would.
Yeah, it was bad.
What's really funny is I just finished. I've been doing a rewatch of the Defenders series, the Netflix produced Marvel series, and I got through season 2. I'm up through season 2 of Luke Cage, and there's a scene in Luke Cage where they light someone on fire in a restaurant, and they let them burn for a while before finally shooting them. And it's just like, oh man, that's just what a way to go. It's somebody screaming in agony. And so having just freshly watched that, I'm like, if you're going to do that, this is the better way to do it. The more humane way.
Yes.
But this cast just doesn't stop. So before we get too deep into it, this is based on real events, and there are big quotes around that because Frank Lucas and Richie Roberts, real people. Frank Lucas was a real kingpin type drug person in New York. Richie Roberts was a narcotics officer that did arrest him and did become his defense lawyer. That part was true. But both of them have said, hey, I mean, it's fictional. Like it takes some liberties with the truth. And you kind of have to know that when you're watching a movie. So bear that in mind when you're watching this. And as we discuss it, that, some of these characters are based on real people. Like this Richie Roberts in the film is a little bit of an amalgamation of a couple of people. But Richie Roberts was a real person. But Chiwetel Ejiofor plays Frank's brother, Huey. And I love him in everything. Everything I see him in, he is phenomenal. And what was cool about seeing this in the theater was I had seen Serenity 2 years earlier with him as the operative. And then the year before this, he was in a movie with Denzel Washington directed by Spike Lee called Inside Man. And if you haven't seen that, that's a real good one too.
I have not seen that, Travis.
Well, make sure I'll take some notes here.
Write that down.
Yes. But he plays the younger brother, Huey Lucas, in this. And he's great as always. Like he's another one of those. Every performance in this movie, doesn't matter who it is, they brought their A game. Like everybody's on point.
I believed everyone.
Who was the most surprising face that popped up for you out of this cast? Like where you were just like completely shocked, because there's a lot of John Hawkes. I love, he was Freddie Spearman. He is one of my favorite character actors going. Yeah. Ted Levine as the kind of police captain. RZA, I think I like RZA. He's a good actor. He's got a lot of charisma. That helps a ton. But who was somebody that you saw them and you completely blown away by it? What was probably the most surprising one for you?
So I had to quick go to IMDb first. There's a few. It's really hard to put it. Man, I don't know. I said now I'm looking at the list. I'm like, all these people surprised me. Josh Brolin, I had no idea. How about that? Like, he
Okay.
shocked me. Like, I didn't know he was in this movie. And then
Mm-hmm.
Common was in this movie. I didn't know
Yep.
that. Like, oh, holy
Another-
crap! Look, Cuba was in this movie.
Yeah.
That was that. All of these gave me that. Like, oh man, that person, Carla Gugino. I mean, I was shocked left and right. I don't know that I have a number one. John Hawkes was good though. John Hawkes was the one that I saw. I'm like, I know that dude. He was doing a lot of stuff in this era, like in this
Yep.
mid-aughts kind of, like he's been in a bunch of stuff, but I don't remember. I couldn't point it out if I tried.
One of my favorite roles he ever did was in Identity. His part in
Yes.
Identity as the guy that's running the hotel when they show up, and then what you learn about him as it goes on. I just loved him in that.
Yes, that's right.
he
Was
just-
in that.
Yeah, he never, like so many actors in this, but he just never does something bad. There's always something compelling about him, and he's got a really unique look. He sort of, I used to, when I was younger, I would conflate him and DJ Qualls a lot because they're both like
Yes,
rail thin and have a similar kind of face going on. And I could never tell the two apart for a while. But I eventually was able to. And Hawks is just, and Oscar nominated too. A lot of,
I didn't know he was Oscar nominated. That's awesome.
yeah, I forget that sometimes, but he got nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Winter's Bone back in 2011.
Oh, okay, yeah. This dude, he's got one of those faces, and I think he's kind of been typecast as like a roughneck, redneck kind of guy a few times, if I recall.
Yeah, he's done a lot of that.
What I remember from. Yeah, like
Mhm.
greasy bar guy is
Yeah.
kind of the way I see him. But yeah, he's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, they were all good. Armand Desante was in this. I picked that up. I'm like, oh, I remember you from Judge Dredd.
Yeah.
'Cause that's the one movie I
toned it-
recall.
He toned it back a little bit from his Judge Dredd performance here.
Yeah, he wasn't as
dialed
much
it-
of a car. Yeah,
Right.
bring it down a level.
Yeah, Carla Gugino, I had 100% forgotten she was in this at all. And what's cool about some of these smaller parts where it's a face that you recognize that's maybe only on screen for a couple of minutes, like Carla, like Ted Levine, who only has the couple of scenes, but there's something about, they're not A-list actors. They're not, so it doesn't feel like stunt casting, but you see them and you're like, oh yeah, I've seen them in a bunch of other stuff. I like them.
Yeah.
Cuba as Nicky Barnes, Common you mentioned, and Common is another one of those guys that just like, he just oozes cool in everything he's in. He's just smooth. The two that surprised me the most that I had completely forgotten were in this. Norman Reedus for one scene.
Yes, that's right.
Because this is 2007, which I think is before Walking Dead.
Yeah, I was about to say it's either before or right around when Walking Dead kicked off, because the character he played very well could have just walked off the set of The Walking Dead and over to the set of The American Gangster. And
he honestly has had that same look since he played Scud in Blade 2. Like he has just kept that look about him. Unshaven, longish hair, little bit greasy, like he's like 2 or 3 days without a shower. Not quite like he's not ripe yet, but you could easily tell he needs, you could use a shower, like, and that's been Norman Reedus forever. Oh yeah. But yeah, that was one. And then the other one was Idris Elba. I
can't believe I did. See, he wasn't in the list of actors I was looking at, but yeah, the minute he showed up, I'm like, is that Idris Elba? That's Idris Elba. Holy cow, that's Idris Elba. Yeah, that's a good one too.
And the thing about it is, like, his scene, so the first scene he's in at the wake for Bumpy, played by Clarence Washington III, I think. Uncredited.
Loved him. I loved him for the 2 minutes I saw him. Loved him.
He's always so good. But at his wake, Idris Elba is, he's not really showing much respect, and that that whole scene, and I was like, oh man, Idris Elba's in this. I forgot he was in. And for some reason, while I was watching it, rewatching it, and I'm taking notes and stuff, I kept wanting to call him Turbo instead of Tango. I don't know why. Like, that's the word my brain kept using was Turbo. I'm like, no, it's Tango. But then he has the most, like, he is involved in the most memorable scene in this movie.
Oh yeah.
And it tells you the strength of this movie that I completely forgotten it was Idris Elba, like with everything else that's going on in it. But that scene, we'll kind of get to in a little bit, but that one is just like, you remember that. And I heard a funny anecdote about it today that I'll share later. But yeah, like everybody in this is just John Polito shows up as another Italian mobster, very similar to his character in Miller's Crossing. He's in like 2 scenes. He basically is there. He does a little speech about how they need like order, how Harlem is going to fall apart because there's no order to anything anymore. And sort of, it kind of is the catalyst for Frank to do what he does. And I love John Polito. I loved him in so many things that he would do. And he usually played either this type of character or the really greasy, like runs a pawn shop or street dealer type of guy.
He was great in Blank Man.
Yes.
You recall the Damon Wayans joint Blank Man. He was wonderful in that.
He was great in that. He was, I loved him in The Crow. He has a small role in there. But he's got that voice. He just had that voice that sounded like he tried to swallow a rasp and it just destroyed his vocal cords. And
he's been sucking down raw oysters for a week. That's what that's what he always looked like to me. He looked like Lips from Dick Tracy.
Nice. Yes. Yes. He's great. T.I., Tip Harris as Stevie Lucas, young T.I. He's become a little bit problematic with some assault, I think, stuff recently, but he's a charismatic actor.
Sure.
Funny thing is, and I thought this was great. He is his dad in this is played by Common, right? So he's playing Common's son. He is only 8 years younger than Common.
It's an old Indiana Jones and Henry Jones Sr. situation.
Yeah. Oh, and the one that really got me was, so our kind of opening scene with Richie is when he's serving that subpoena, and he's going up and he's talking about, I know the guy from high school, and him and his partner go up and they serve that subpoena, and there's that quick little action sequence. The actor that he serves the subpoena to is Kevin Corrigan, another
I love
character actor. I love him. He is, and it's all these actors that disappear into roles, right? Kevin Corrigan does that, even when they're memorable. Corrigan, John Polito, Common, Idris Elba, they can disappear into these roles, and you forget that they're in so many things. What shocks me, and I will never understand this about the awards kind of system, is that this movie was only up for 2 Academy Awards. In the 2008 Academy Awards, it was only up for 2. Art direction, absolutely should have been up for. We'll get to that because I have thoughts about that. And 1 acting, and the acting one, I will let you think about this for a second. Guess who you think would have gotten a nomination for this movie? For it was not Best Actor, it was supporting. Okay, so it was acting in a supporting role. Who do you think would have gotten one?
Acting
any
in
idea at
all? Let's go with roll the dice on this. Let's say Josh Brolin.
Okay, wrong. Ruby Dee.
Ruby Dee. Oh,
Mama Lucas.
Okay,
and look,
Travis. She was great. But sometimes awards. This happens in the Grammys all the time. We didn't give these people the justification we could before they were almost dead. So we need to put them in there to make sure we get them an Oscar before they die. This is what they tend to do. Now I'm not saying their performance was bad. It was great. It was just not much. I mean, it was
It
there.
was short.
Yeah.
The amount of screen time was not much. She basically got the nomination for one scene, and that's the scene where she stands up to Frank and slaps him and and says all that to him. Like, because that, I mean, you want to talk about an emotional scene. Like, this is Frank Lucas is at this point in his life virtually untouchable, but his mama ain't afraid to slap him and tell him that she would leave him, and that's like it's a big scene. So she earned, I think, the nomination. She did not win. The win, I believe, went to, that was a year Tilda Swinton won, I want to say, for
for Michael Clayton.
Yeah.
Another one.
But I was just so surprised that this movie didn't get more, at least nominations.
Yeah, Travis, I'm looking at the best actress and best performance in support, like all these. I mean, I appreciate Johnny Depp, Sweeney Todd, and that's fine. But I could easily replace him with Denzel and not feel bad about it.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of is there was some Denzel fatigue because he had already won and had been nominated a couple times. But, then you got Daniel Day-Lewis, who won it for There Will Be Blood, which
he
hell of a performance.
It. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's always difficult because who do you remove? Like Johnny Depp, of those performances, Johnny Depp has done some great work. I don't think Sweeney Todd is some of his best. I think he's done far better.
And that's another one that could have been, hey, we really want Johnny to get an Oscar at some point, but he's not getting it for Pirates. So let's throw in the Sweeney Todd. How's that sound to everybody? And everybody goes, yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel like it's weird.
Javier Bardem won that year for No Country for Old Men. Totally earned it. That performance is haunting. Yeah. That's a tough one. Like, I look at, it's Javier Bardem, Hal Holbrook, Tom Wilkinson, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and Casey Affleck. Like, and Casey Affleck, take or leave, but his performance in The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, which I will always say the full title of because it's ridiculous, is really good. It is a good performance. It's just like, who do you remove from there? But I could list off 4 or 5 different people from American Gangster that I would have been happy to see get a supporting acting nod.
Oh yeah.
As well. So it's a tough one. It's just because everybody's so good in this. There's nobody in this movie that feels miscast at any point.
Oh no. Everything's great.
And when you're doing a movie based on real events, that can happen sometimes where it's like, no, all I see is Josh Brolin. No, Brolin plays that role of the corrupt cop just like to a T. I mean, from the moment he steps on screen, you're just like, oh, I don't like this guy at all. He's terrible. And then he goes even further by shooting the dog. And I was like, well, okay, he doesn't deserve anything anymore. Like, I'm done with you, sir.
Yeah. The actors are disappearing, like you said, because every time I saw these actors, I had to like double take. Like when I saw Brolin, is that Idris Elba? And when Josh Brolin came, I'm like, is that Josh Brolin? Is that Chiwetel Ejiofor? Like everybody just fell into their roles so strong that it shocked me. I think that's why I went with Josh Brolin first. Back to your original question, because I saw him and I wasn't ready for slick back hair, mustache, goatee, soul patch, whatever. Josh Brolin.
Yeah. Also, Lamari Nadal as Ava. She did a lot with minimal dialogue. She doesn't have to say a lot. That her performance in the scene where Frank burns the coat alone, was great. And that was such a cool scene because we had earlier in the movie where he pulled Huey aside and he's like, Huey, what are you doing? What are you wearing? Like, what's going on here? You look like a clown. You got this big arrest me sign on you and all of that. And then, shift forward a little bit and he's showing up at the Muhammad Ali fight in a $10,000 chinchilla coat and that hat, which, by the way, Frank Lucas really wore. I saw a picture of him in that, and it's amazing. But it's like, he had gotten so big and so in his own head that he felt untouchable.
Yeah, and at
And
least in the way this movie played out, that was kind of the peak, and then his downfall, because that's when the cops got curious, right? That's when Richie got
yep,
curious. Like, wait a minute, he could, if he'd have been in a business suit sitting up front, they might not have thought a thing of it. Like, other than him talking to the mobsters that were in the row behind him, but that might not have been quite as recognizable as potential shifty behavior without
yeah,
that chinchilla coat on. He broke his only rule, and then it was over.
yeah, because he would have gotten noticed, but it wouldn't have been as obvious. But he's wearing that big fur, ridiculous hat, which that was a great line from Armando Sante. You gonna wear that hat the whole time? I can't see the fight. Oh, you paid for it.
Pretty good.
Like right down to the guy playing his cousin Nate in Thailand,
Oh
and
yeah.
Ruben Santiago Hudson playing Doc, who's got that role. Like he becomes the Frank. He becomes who Frank was at the start of the movie, and he's just like, I love a movie that's got that character, right? Who just he's in all these scenes, and you almost at one point in the movie, I like forget that he's there, and then Frank will walk somewhere, and just Doc will be right behind him. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that's right. Doc's literally everywhere with this guy at all times.
Yeah.
It's just everybody up and down just nailing it in this. And then on top of that, to have it set in New York in the 70s, and the filming of this, like it got an art direction Oscar nomination, and it looks so good because New York City to it, has a look to it. That is, you can tell when movies film in other cities, and they try to pass it off as New York. Like you can always tell. But 1970s New York, because we saw a lot of that in the 70s film industry, because a lot of movies were getting shot in New York in the 1970s.
Yeah.
And we've seen it a lot, and they captured the look of that, I think, to a T. I got a lot of feel of like the movie The French Connection when watching this, in terms of like visual style. Like obviously it doesn't look like it was shot in the 70s, but the backgrounds and everything that they have give me that feeling the whole time.
Colors, costume, population density,
Mm-hmm.
cars. I mean, that smoky, filthy 70s New York. There's like a grime on everything. That's that's the sense you get. It's like, if I touched that, I would want to wash my hands like immediately.
It's just a thin coat of something over everything, and you can just feel it
just
on
a
your
little
fingertips.
Wet, but you're not sure if it's rain. It's just like, what is that? Why is that wet still? What's going on there?
And the costuming you brought up was just, I mean, God, all the costuming was so good. It all had the look. Like Frank always looks just dressed to the nines in everything he's wearing. Even when he gives the house to his mom, which is another one of those great scenes where, and it was a trailer shot where she goes, "Whose house is that?" And he's like, "It's yours, mama." But even that, he's wearing that kind of short sleeve collared, like almost sweater, but not quite shirt. I don't know how to describe that shirt, but that and a pair of like khaki slacks. And he just looks good all the time. And then when he gets a suit on, whew, I mean,
look out. He's exuding power. And I mean, on the flip side of that, Richie, he doesn't look like a cop to me at any point in this. He just looks like kind of a schlub. It's just like out there, he's working. He's doing blue collar cop work. And
he's just a little bit scruffy.
He's a little bit scruffy. He's got like some flowery shirt on that's just 70s up one way and down the other. And I mean, he's a gun tucked in the back of his pants, but otherwise you have no real idea he's a cop.
Yeah.
He just looks like he's stumbling through most of it, but he's stumbling through it all with a very powerful and direct moral compass, at least for the law. Maybe not for his surrounding life, but for the law, he cares, and he's going to do the right thing. And I appreciated that a lot in his character. It was good.
I did too. I liked that distinction of this character where he is the straight-laced cop. Like, they make it a big point that he finds that $1 million in unmarked bills and turns it in, right?
Mm.
And it's like, well, why'd you do that? Well, it was the right thing to do. But his moral compass, as you pointed out, is for the law and what's written. Because when it comes to home life, he's just kind of doing whatever he wants. And, you know, he's cheating on his wife and all this kind of stuff. So it's an interesting dichotomy to him that I think gave that character more depth and more believability as a character. So I very much appreciated that. I also like that Crowe he's bulky, but he's not like ripped. But they made it a point to have a scene in the movie where he's working out, and you get that sense that like he's built like a guy who played football in high school, and he's kind of kept working out, but not in nearly the shape that he was. But you also know, like, if he had to, he could handle himself, and he's probably got some of that middle-aged man strength, right? Like,
it's middle-aged man strength, and it's mostly arm day. Like, he's got no time for core or legs. We're just gonna lift things. Like, that's what a man needs, is biceps.
He's got biceps and shoulders he works on, but like his core isn't defined, but you know that that's solid. Like, he's not soft. Yeah. Like, if you ran into him, it would be like hitting a wall. And I like, there's something about that look that, like, it's the functional strength. It's the guy who's, you know, it's like if you meet somebody like who's a mason, let's say, who's done masonry work for their whole life, right? They don't look intimidating until you learn that they've done nothing but masonry work for their entire life. And then you realize that they could crush your head with one hand like a grape. Yeah, because like, they've spent their entire life lifting cinder blocks one at a time and just carrying them places.
Yeah, one person that strikes me when you say that is Jim Varney, who played Ernest. When he rolls up his sleeves and Ernest goes to camp, you're like, dang, that guy's got wiry muscle. Like, muscle used, but like Eastern Kentucky mountain muscle. You wouldn't know it, but you also don't want to be hit by him.
Yeah, exactly. Like guys that, you know, masons, carpenters, farmers, like these people that have done physical ditch diggers, right? Guys that are doing that their whole life, swinging hammers. Like, it's that functional muscle where it doesn't look as intimidating as some might, but boy, if you got in a scrap with him and he hits you, the only thing that's happening after that is you hitting the ground because it's over. It's like being hit by chunks of concrete.
It's I forgot what I was gonna say. Anyway, it was more about just fawning over Russell Crowe's muscle. Oh, it's period accurate. That's what I was getting after. It's period accurate. In the 70s, we didn't have Marvel superhero level strength on normal people, or even in the movies. It was kind of like frowned upon in the 70s for you to be like super built. Like, that was for bodybuilders and stuff. That's for, and they don't do anything but work out. They're basically lazy. They just work out all day. But you and me, we have jobs. We do stuff. So we're going to look dad bodish. That was when the dad bod was actually attractive to people. And you didn't have to look like Chris Hemsworth to turn heads, you know?
And it was a thing, like, that was what actors looked like. Even if you look at like Burt Reynolds at the time, he was in great shape, but he was not, he didn't look like he worked out 8 hours a day. Like, he was in good shape. And so I did appreciate that, the period accurateness of that. And like all of them, I mean, there's shots of, you know, them sitting around, all the narcotics detectives and are all sitting around, and like RZA's got his sleeves rolled up and he's got a little definition to his arms, but he's still just like a lanky, wiry guy. I appreciated that. It added, just like the layer of grime over everything on set. It was that added authenticity. Same thing with like all the cars. Doing anything period piece is tough anyway as a film, in filmmaking, because it's so much more expensive. You have to spend so much extra time dressing your set and making sure your backgrounds don't show up. It's a little bit easier today because it's a lot easier to digitally remove things that you don't want to see. than it was
Satellite
even
dishes on every portion of New York City.
That is one of my favorite things about Raiders of the Lost Ark was
Yeah.
the shot in Cairo where they had to ask everybody to take down their TV antennas, like half of Cairo,
Yeah, just so they
because
can get the whole shot.
and they couldn't change the shot. They had to use whatever angle they were going to use because you're not going to go ask a bunch more people to take them down.
Yeah.
And then obviously today you can just paint all that out. But I love that in filmmaking when you can take the time to do that. And I'm sure if I went through and watched this frame by frame and analyzed it all, I could find some cars that don't work right, some signage that, doesn't seem right, but everything felt really authentic.
It did.
And I really enjoyed that about it. And it's just top to bottom, this movie, it's a hallmark of Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott is very good at being meticulous in the visuals and the style of his films. Really, his brother Tony was too, but Tony had a different style, a different look that he went for. But there's just something about a Ridley Scott movie. I can always pick him out. And he also doesn't always do the same types of movies. He's not a horror guy. He's not an action guy. He's just making movies. Yeah. And I love that. I love the variety of stuff that he does.
Yeah, he just picks a story and he goes, I could tell that pretty well on camera, I think. And he goes for it. It's like, you're talking about Alien and Gladiator and Kingdom of Heaven and this, like the two Kingdom of Heaven and Gladiator, the closest in probably look, feel, but that's just because they're both epics,
Yeah.
But, he doesn't have to do an epic. I actually thought originally that this was Tony Scott when I was turning it on. I thought, this is because I couldn't remember when he passed away. So I was like, this must have been one of Tony Scott's last things. I was like, oh wait, this is Ridley. Not expected that. Okay. Yeah, so that was new to me.
Let's see. So originally, the first director that was on board to do this was Antoine Fuqua, who had done Training Day.
Yeah.
And he was going to do it, but apparently, like a month or two before shooting was supposed to start, the studio backed out for concerned about the budget getting too big. I guess he had some of his choices for supporting roles were a little too expensive and things were kind of getting out of hand, I guess. So he was no longer on it. At one point I did read that David Fincher was possibly going to do it, which would have been interesting because it would have been very different.
Yeah. That would have been so funny you say it's Antoine Fuqua because Stephanie, when we turned it on, she thought it was, in her words, the guy who did Training Day who did this. When I was like, I don't think this is a Tony. I think at that point I was like, I think this is Tony Scott. Because I was all confused. And then when the Scott Free Productions came up, I was like, wait, did Tony and Ridley work in the same Scott Free? They're both their product. I got all messed up for a little while. I had a rocky start to the movie because I started it and then they were serving papers and then they were banging down doors and punching people. Like, what just happened? What are we doing? It took me a good 30 minutes to finally understand that the cops were not good people in this movie. By and large. And I was like, okay, everything that has just happened is because cops suck in this movie. Got it. I understand.
Okay, so here's a question for you, because I have my own story when I first saw this movie. Did you think while you're watching this, at some point, somebody was going to turn of the cops and be like a mole or something? Like, did you have that feeling while you were watching it?
Travis, let me tell you a little bit about how I watch a movie. Okay. I don't think about the future. I just think about what's happening in front of me. This works in some movies like this one, but in a James Bond movie, I'm lost the entire time. I've only seen 2 James Bond movies I understand because I can only watch things scene by scene. I'm just... my mom, she figures out all the mysteries ahead of time. She's got thoughts and plans and ideas. Not
fair enough.
No, I didn't think there would be a mole because I didn't even think past the moment I was watching.
I just remember, I remember being in the theater thinking, and maybe it was because some like movies I had watched prior to seeing this kind of went that route, and it was very tropey to have like one of the cops ends up being a, because there
Yeah.
was the whole theme of like crooked cops and all of the cops being
Right.
crooked. I kept having this nagging thing in the back of my head, like, oh, at some point one of these guys is going to turn out to actually be crooked, even though he got to choose them.
Yeah.
And I like that they didn't go that route, that they were all genuinely like not on the take in any way. I thought that was a nice change from some things that I'd seen before that.
I did have a little concern when he did the like, who all think I'm crazy for turning in the money, and like everybody raised their hand. I thought, oh well, he'll just kick out this whole team and like start over. But then
Yeah.
like I realized it was a joke, and they all just were like, yeah, you're crazy. But it was like, you're crazy. You still did the right thing. We're all on the up and up. You're nuts. And I don't know if I would have done it, but you did it, and it's good for you. There was no animosity there because he did it.
Right.
I think that was good way.
I think that was what I was worried about the first time I saw it, was that at some point somebody was going to be like, gonna give in to temptation, and none of them ever did, And when I watch it now, I realize I had no reason to, because that's all set up. Like Ted Levine tells him, you get to pick your own guys. And then he goes to John Hawkes and they're having their thing. And Hawkes is pointing out, the two guys that he's going to bring with him. And he's telling him like, yeah, but they're on the up and up. And if you want me, you're taking them too. And I liked that.
That's how my next D&D campaign is going to start, by the way. This is exactly what I'm going to do.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Because that opening scene where they track the car, him and his partner, Richie and Javier, and they wait and they wait and they wait, and then they end up going and looking in the trunk and find all that cash. That scene sets up so much, because we've already learned a lot of what we need to know about who Frank is, and now we learn what we need to know about who Richie is. And this movie, for being, it's 2 hours and 37 minutes, I think, total, which is a long movie. And the funny thing about it is it's all this buildup, and then after the climax of the film was like, and then they brought these people down and they did all of this, and all of this stuff happened. And usually that's what your movie would be about, right? Is the taking down of all the corrupt cops and the taking, the dismantling of the drug trade and all of that. And this movie, that wasn't the story Ridley Scott and the filmmakers were telling here. They wanted all of that rise of Frank Lucas and subsequent fall. And I thought that was really cool. I thought it was a very compelling story to tell.
Oh, yeah. It's way more interesting than we took down a bunch of cops. Look at this partnership between the mob and the police. This was cool. Because for one, it was a misdirection, because I didn't know where this movie was going. I thought this movie was about a gangster and heroin and how he goes, and I expected like a showdown between him and Richie at some point. I thought we were climbing to that.
Yep.
And it flips on you in the last 20 minutes and maybe 10. I mean, it was really close to the end where it becomes a whole nother story, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah, and you've got Denzel and Russell don't have a scene together until they're in the same scene once prior to him arresting him, but they don't have a scene together until 2 hours and 15 minutes into the movie, 2 hours and 20 minutes in. And then they work together to bring everything down. But I had a note. My note was like, within 15 minutes of the start of this movie, we know who Frank is and how much of a man of principle he is and what he is willing to do to keep and have respect. And we know who Robbie is. We know what his principles are, at least when it comes to the law. And we know that he is going to do the right thing by the law, no matter what. And to set that up about the two of them and then get to watch them go in parallel without knowing who each other are. Like, they start off. That's the other thing I think I really liked about this, and why this story was so interesting to me, was there's no connection between them at all to start. Frank Lucas is literally nobody in the world of crime. Like, he is thought of as Bumpy's driver. That's all he is. none of them to give him any respect. And he builds himself through just sheer force of will, basically, into the man in Harlem. And then you've got a cop who is a pariah in his own precinct and is working to be a lawyer. I thought that was kind of cool how they subtly did all that too. How they show him at night school and they show him with his bar letter where he passed the bar exam, but they don't make a big deal out of it. But he's trying to be more than just a cop. And it's just like their parallel stories going on in them, and slowly Richie figuring out who Frank is and unraveling all this stuff. Like I love stories. Like I love good storytelling, and this had that in spades.
This is one of those examples. Like I use Home Alone all the time as a really good example of storytelling and getting everything the audience needs to know to them, either through words or visuals. And this does that. Like it does, like you were talking about, you get to see Frank and you get to see Richie. And in the first 10 to 15 minutes, you know everything you need to know to follow along. And it rewards you for paying attention. Because I think the night school thing is a throwaway line. If you're getting popcorn or you're whispering something to your friend next to you, you kind of miss it. You don't really think that's that important. So they show it to you again later because he's getting his letter saying you successfully passed the bar in Jersey. So I give it to you again. It's a partnership. Like I love screenwriters that know their story is going to be told on a screen. They're not writing everything into dialogue with 30 minutes of exposition. They're going, no, I'm going to hand this to a talented filmmaker who is going to take it and fill in the gaps that I don't have written here with junk on the screen that's going to make it work. And Home Alone does that in spades right from the beginning. The ticket getting thrown in the trash with the milk, Uncle Frank's a jerk, the phone lines going down, like every little bit of that. The kid at you just know, you see it all getting set up right out of the gate. And you're like, wow, they didn't even have to say anything. I know what's going on because I'm watching a flipping movie.
Well, and it brings me to a scene in this that is indelible for me. It's baked into my brain now, and I now won't forget that Idris Elba is in it. And it is, we have seen Frank Lucas slowly building up his stuff, right? And he takes the time I love that he goes through all of the steps to go to Thailand, and we get to see like him getting shots for travel and getting his passport and getting ready to go. And then he goes to Thailand and meets with his cousin.
Vietnam, right?
Or did he go? He was in Bangkok.
Okay, went to Thailand and went to Vietnam.
Yeah.
Or did they never go to Vietnam? And I'm lost.
They went in the jungles, somewhere. But this was during the Vietnam conflict, so it's all. But he takes the time to do all of that, and I love the line when he's there. He's like, "So you want to go out into the jungle?" He's like, "I came all this way. Like I'm just going to keep going," because he was singularly focused on, I'm going to go to the source. Yeah. And I like that the movie didn't spend a lot of time getting him there. They were just like, yeah, he gets there.
Yeah. There's no need to show a montage of him walking through the mountains on a donkey. Just put it there. We made it. And it's all because that's what Bumpy told him. Bumpy died telling him we got too many middlemen. And he just followed directions. He Forrest Gumped his way into being a heroin kingpin.
Yeah. And we see him build all this up, and then he calls his family down in Greensboro, and he brings them up to New York, and he's buying houses, and he's doing all this stuff. And so we've got all of this set up, and now he brings all 5 of his brothers to New York City, and he's explaining to them how, the man he worked for 15 plus years ran his business, but didn't own his business. And he was rich, but he wasn't white man rich. He wasn't wealthy, which also makes me think about the Chris Rock bit where he talks about being rich versus being wealthy. Like Shaq is rich. The guy that signs Shaq's checks is wealthy. But he's telling them all this. They sit down to have their diner, lunch, whatever it is, when he looks over and he sees Tango. And
Turbo?
Turbo. And this scene plays out. One of the trivia bits on IMDb made me laugh, and it said that every time Frank Lucas pours a bunch of sugar, it tells his bodyguards or friends that something's about to go down. I'm like, it happened twice in the movie, and one of them can kind of fit that mold. But he takes but I like that the scene is a callback to the last scene that had Tango in it, where he confronted him in that same diner. But he pours the sugar out, and it's just the look, because he's telling him about how like honesty and integrity are the way to do business and all this. He still hasn't told him what they do yet. Mm-hmm. Presumably, we're assuming that anyway. But for him to just like mid-sentence pour all the sugar out of that container and get up and be like, I'll be right back, and just walk across the street, and he watching his brothers opening the window like, what's going on here? And the power move that it is to pull the gun on the street in broad daylight in front of the market and all those people. And I mean, did that scene play out how you thought it was going to, or were you legitimately surprised by the way that scene happened?
My jaw hit the floor, Travis. I did not expect that. I don't watch movies. Movies that I watch, there's always the empty threat. There's the we're not beating around the bush. We're just gonna do the thing. That doesn't happen. Yeah. So I was very shocked.
And it happens so quickly and without fanfare. And it just like it happens, it's done, and he walks back, wipes his hands off, like, so where was I? But it calls back to the previous scene with the two of them, the conflict they had there. Like, it's brilliantly done. It's brilliantly bookending that whole saga between Tango and Frank Lucas. And it's just perfection. And I did like the anecdote, and it was Ridley Scott talking about it, that the day they shot that scene, the prop weapon that they used for the scene had no barrel in it whatsoever. Like, it was solid. The whole slide was a solid piece. All it would do is recoil. And the way Ridley Scott said is like, no blanks, no powder, no nothing. We're not, there's no like possibility of anything going wrong. And so he told Idris Elba to really lean into that barrel, where the barrel would be, to really lean into it. Like he's that confident the guy's not going to shoot him just for the performance. Well, he apparently didn't realize or didn't know that there was any recoil to that when the trigger was pulled. And so he went down and like he got shot, and according to Ridley Scott, he just screamed out, "I got shot," like thinking it really happened, which to me is a hilarious, like, yeah, the recoil popped him in the forehead. But like, I can just imagine being on the set that day, and how that had to have been pretty funny. But like, it's such a powerful scene. And again, like I said, setting up who Frank Lucas is. He's and for nothing to happen from that, there are no repercussions whatsoever from that, also tells you just how powerful Frank Lucas got in that.
Yeah, I guess
in Harlem.
You find out how powerful he'd become, because like, I mean, we see it at Bumpy's first scene, almost last scene, where he's handing out the turkeys. Like, that was the whole point, was like, I'm going to make the city love me, and the city will protect me from anything that's going to happen. So no one, because you hear the market person call out, "What's it today, Frank?" or whatever. Like, they know him.
Yep.
So when he gets rid of Tango, their whole, all I'm thinking is they're going, "I didn't see nothing. I don't know what happened. I wasn't here." And Frank knows he can do that. He knows he can walk up. And Tango has been a pain in his butt since the day of the funeral, when Tango didn't give him any respect. And then he was just, I mean, he marked him from that moment that this guy's going to be a problem. And when he is, I'm done with him, and he won't be a problem anymore. There's none of that. Like, we're not beating around the bush. We're not giving you second chances. We're not doing that. You give me 20% and I'm punching, or I'm taking you out. That's the end of the story. And Idris leaning into the gun saying like, "What are you going to do? Shoot me?" Yeah. I did it. It was such a power move. It told you so much about Frank and how far he was willing to go. And at that point, I didn't think anybody around him was safe. And he gets into an altercation with his brother. You were talking about the clothes. What are
Mhm.
you doing? Are you wearing these clothes? You're walking around saying, please arrest me. I was like, is he going to kill his own brother? And he looks at him. And every time Frank says, my man, somebody's in trouble.
Yes.
Somebody's in big. And all I could think was like, oh, he my manned him. And now it's gonna be bad. And he's like, if you weren't my brother, I would kill you. And I was sitting there thinking, I believe that. I believe that.
Yes.
He's dead where he stands, right there.
Mhm. Yes, he would be. And it's just I can't say enough good things about this. The music is good throughout all of it. Both like the soundtrack stuff, and then anytime they were in any of the clubs, the music was always just spot on, and it fit so well. And everything top to bottom, I feel like this movie is it's kind of underrated in a way, because I don't feel like it gets talked about enough as like a good, not just a good Ridley Scott movie, but like a great movie from that era, from 2007. And I don't know if it was because 2007 had movies like No Country for Old Men, Michael Clayton, Atonement, I think was one of them, because I think so there were some great movies that came out that year.
Yeah. It was a big year.
And I don't know, I wonder if some of it is the structure of it and the way that it sort of builds up to this point and then just kind of glosses over a whole lot at the end. And the way that it ends, because it doesn't end in a normal Hollywood style of like the ending of it where he goes to prison, but then he gets out, and that last shot is Frank. Yeah. So I don't know if that plays into it a little bit or not. I think honestly, I kind of like it because it has a story it wants to tell. And the story is about Frank Lucas rising to power and what he did to get there, how willing he was to go wherever he had to go, to do whatever he had to do. And he didn't care what it was and who he had to deal with. He was going to be the man. And I love those things where people are like, who does he work for? Who do you represent? He's like, myself, and nobody's buying it. The DA, that scene with the Russell Crowe and Ted Levine and the DA after he's looking through the plane, that guy just cannot believe that, one guy could do what the mafia couldn't do, and all this kind of stuff. Uses a lot more colorful language I ain't going to use, but the very racist DA, we'll put it that way. But like that right there, that was the power of Frank Lucas in this whole situation, was that nobody expected that out of one man, and he just was like, nope, I'm going to do it. And
then when he gets
the mafia
cornered, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, even the mafia was, and the Armand DeSantis character, like, couldn't believe that he's doing this kind of stuff and was trying to get him to expand beyond Harlem. And I think, honestly, Frank Lucas would have been just happy owning Harlem and having that and that be it. And never, because he had everything he wanted at that point, owning 5 apartments in New York. Like that scene where he's in the apartment and he, tickles a couple of piano keys and he's like, I'll take it. No contingencies. I'm buying this with cash. Like, there again, power move, like just throwing cash around. But so anyway, you were going to say, sorry.
No, I was thinking once he finally gets once he finally gets cornered, he's got caught. He's in interrogation room with Richie. He does his last, what I think is a power move attempt. He's going to try to get this cop. I can get rid of you. You can go wherever you want. We're done. You let me go back to business. Let me go. All this stuff. And when he finds out he's got a guy that's not going to move like that, slaps the coffee. He's trying everything he normally would with anybody. But man, does his attitude change when he realizes he's got a legit paladin in front of him. He's just like, oh, okay. Well, how about this? We just take, and then he finds out that cop's really interested in taking out other dirty cops. He's like, oh, you want to take down the police? Oh yeah, I'll give you everybody you want. Let's do this. And then it becomes this partnership, and you're like, what just happened? But to him, he's still, the police have harassed his people in Harlem long enough too. He's sick of them. It's like I see this as a win-win. I'm taking down corrupt cops. You want to take down corrupt cops? Hopefully, I guess my brothers are going to get away fine. It's just me, Then it's like he understood he was beaten, but he wasn't going to lose. If that makes any sense. And I love the way his entire demeanor changed. You don't see him really smiling, having a good time for real the entire movie. Like he might smile, but it's usually with a "I'm about to stab somebody" look.
Yeah.
Where he's with his wife. But in this, he looks like he's honest to goodness having a blast writing down cop names and looking at pictures with all these police. And I just it tickled me like, ha, that guy, we got that one. I'm like, this is, and my wife actually looked up Richie Roberts and Frank Lucas and found a picture of them all chummy. like 20 minutes before the movie was over, and she's like, why are they so chummy? And then she figured like, oh, they actually did a lot of work together. That's why they look like they're smiling with their arms around each other. They did the work.
And that slug right at the end where it talks about how, Richie Roberts left being a cop and became a defense attorney. And his first client was Frank Lucas. Yeah. And helped, defended him. So
help cut his sentence. It's super great. I mean, that was
because in reality, Frank Lucas did get sentenced to 70 years, but he got out in 1984.
1991. Initially. 15 years. Did he? 84?
He got out in like 84, I want to say. Was out for a year or two, but then violated his probation, went back in, and then eventually got out again in 91. So it wasn't, the movie makes it feel like it was one stint, which works better for the narrative.
Yeah.
But in reality, he did two. But part of that was because of how helpful he was in dismantling the corruption rampant in the police force at the time. So, and I do appreciate that the movie didn't glorify either side. Like it showed the good and the bad sides of both. The criminal part and the cops, it showed that there are cops that are doing a good job, but there are also just a ton of corrupt ones. And clearly that hasn't changed over the years. And it showed that
no matter where you put them, there's good ones and bad ones. I don't care what job they have.
Yeah. And it showed that, there are perks to a life of crime. Sure. Certainly. I mean, we saw some of those, guy got like third row seats to a prize fight. That's big. And that's when pro boxing was big, like Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier.
That's Frazier. Yeah. That was a fight of the century level event.
Yeah. But also seeing the downsides of it, seeing how it can all fall apart and how bad it can be. And I also liked that it's all centered around heroin, and they never glorified heroin one bit throughout the movie. And in fact, the drug use shots they're actually pretty hard to watch. They do not make it look good at all. And yet Frank is willing to be a part of it the whole time because
he gives him the power. He's making tons of money. He gives him the power he wants. He's doing things that he knew Bumpy could never do. He owned his own business. That's the way he looked at it. I own my own business, and I'm getting product from the source, like Bumpy told me he wished we could do. And the thing that was killing everybody was he wasn't cutting it with powdered other stuff like flour or lactose or whatever they were cutting it with. And so people were ODing because they were doing what they thought they always did with every other heroin. And they were getting 100% pure and just didn't know what they were doing anymore. People were dying left and right. Yeah.
And I also like
Grand Central Station around here.
Yeah. I also like that the way the story is structured and told is we don't have like Richie and Frank don't have a bunch of interactions, or Frank and Brolin's character don't have a ton of interactions. They only really spend a couple of scenes together at all throughout the entirety of the movie, all of them, which feels like real life. You don't in reality, you have your small circle of people you see a lot, but anybody outside of that, you don't just run into on a constant basis.
Yeah.
And so for Frank to have effectively two run-ins with Brolin's character, who is overseeing so much and just like running crap and is sort of the top of the corruption, is kind of cool. And like, again, and Richie only has really 2 interactions with him. And I love that they bookend and they do the same thing. Like when Brolin comes into Jersey, he's like, yeah, next time you get on that bridge, maybe you should call me first. Just throwing that back in his face. It's just, when take it as it is, which is a dramatized story about real people, it's a really good movie. And I do think that it is just it's underseen. I don't think enough people saw it. And it's not like it wasn't a box office bomb. They did bring the budget down to, so the budget ended up being about $100 million. And a lot of that I think was cast, and they shot it in New York, which is always expensive, and a couple of days in Thailand, but it made $270 worldwide. So it made back its budget plus. It didn't have a ridiculous marketing campaign that like a lot of tentpole films do. So, it was good, but it wasn't gangbusters. But I do think some of that it was a little bit less marketing, and it's not a tentpole type movie. It's not a big action movie. It's a drama. Dramas have a tendency to not do as well at the box office as other types of films do.
Rated R drug drama, banking on mostly the star power behind it. Like you're banking on Denzel and Russell Crowe and Ridley Scott. That's what because if I remember the marketing, it was a trailer. But I mean, what else? They couldn't really tell you a lot. You can't show people shooting up heroin on TV and you're on your trailers. Like there's only so much they could actually tell you about the movie to get you interested. I mean, shoot, like I said, I was interested. I just didn't, for whatever reason, I didn't go that day. I don't remember what was out at the same time. Maybe that would tell me a little bit, like what other movies were out that maybe overshadowed it for me. But it's hard to sell an R-rated movie anyway, but much less an R-rated drama that's not action.
Yep. Yeah, it's hard. Those are harder to sell. But they typically do. This was released in November, so it was very much an award season's release as well. But I do think that a movie like this can have a longer tail. I think if more people, it can kind of be one of those like word of mouth ones. It's sort of Scorsese's made his entire career on movies like this. And so it's one of those. I do think the more people see it or remember it, the better. It's one of those movies that isn't super quotable. And so I think maybe that has some of it too. Like the dialogue is really good, but it's very natural. So it doesn't have quips. Doesn't other than, the my man, that's no, there aren't. I did capture a couple of clips just because I liked them. Which I can play for you. It's really just a couple of Denzel's. But first I got John Polito because I just love his voice.
More important than any one man's life is order.
I also like that line.
That's good. Yeah.
And then the one case of voiceover that at first I didn't remember it from when I saw it the first time. So when it started with that John Polito voiceover, I was like, this feels out of place, but because it went into an actual conversation that he was having and became diegetic, I was like, oh, okay, that works once it ended. But it was him talking about the cops taking the drugs from the French Connection bust and then cutting it and selling it back to the mafia. So it was this one from Polito.
Whacking it down to nothing and selling it back to us.
And that just such a mafia line.
Yeah, I love that. It does have that Scorsese feel to it, like the Italian mobster New York scene. Yeah,
it feels like that moment was taken right out of Goodfellas.
It does. I even feel like, I don't know if that was a horn in the background or what, but it was a little jazzy.
Yep. This one is okay. This was a great moment. This is right early on, when Richie and his partner are talking about the money that they found.
Okay.
And his partner is telling them they should just keep it. They can't turn it in. And I liked this line.
Cops kill cops they can't trust.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That whole thing, I was so confused to start with because I am a naive person. And I just was like, why are they arguing about turning the money? What is going on? And it was, I get it now. It's because if they turned the money in, they knew that half the force was going to think they were, on I guess on the right side of the law, or they wouldn't look the other way if other cops were to take the money or do something with it. It's like to them, to the cops that were looking in at the money, that's now off the table. I could have bought a boat with that if these guys hadn't have been idiots and turned it in. We could have just split it.
And it
made
gets
more sense
reflected. Yeah. And it gets reflected later on when he confronts, or not confronts, but when he follows the $20,000 into New York City, and Brolin and his guys show up and take the bag of money, and he chases them down. He's like, "Hey guys, you've got my money in there. It's Essex County money. I need that back." And the one cop is like, "Oh man, I saw a brand new Chris Craft in my driveway." Like,
yeah, that whole scene messed me up too, because I was like, how does he know they're cops? But I guess they must have said something when they were roughing up the other guy, or he just knows that's how this works. And it's. I was like, oh man, you're me. You're chasing down these guys and go, whoa, please, that was an accident. Like, I totally need that money. That's what I would do, and I would be found in an alley somewhere. Like, but it's like, hold on, I'm real sorry, corrupt policeman with guns. I need money back. It was a wild exchange to me. I love that scene so much because you could tell Richie's out of uniform. I mean, they're all out of uniform, but Richie's not dressed like they are, and he's like obviously the low man on the totem pole, and they could just say no and take the money if they wanted to. But dude's like, don't let it happen again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he almost lost, because that right before that, he had asked for the money. And the chief was like, you're never getting this again. Like, this is a whole year's worth I'm handing you right now. It was just, I loved every minute of that whole sequence. I was like, what is going on?
It also had my single favorite shot in the entire movie. And that is Russell Crowe walking up to and passing the windows of that diner, and then posting up right outside the window. And the camera then does a 180 pan around him. And when it hits the wall and stops, boom, there's Josh Brolin and his three buds walking down the street, looking like, just looking like badasses in their sunglasses. And it was just such a beautiful shot inside of that whole sequence that goes on. That's so good.
It's two sides of the coin, and you're seeing them play out like together right then and there. You're watching the good guy and the bad guys, and they're both on the same team, but they're not. They're different factions entirely. Yep. It's so cool.
I got a couple of Denzel lines. This one, this is a thing where Denzel Washington doesn't really do like accents. He doesn't change a lot of the times the tone of voice that he uses. He might change his cadence a little bit, but for the most part, he doesn't. But I liked this because this felt also very period accurate. When Bumpy's having his heart attack in the discount store, and he's calling for the ambulance, and he keeps saying, and he says it twice. He says, "Call the ambulance!"
Ambulance.
I love that.
I remember ambulance. Yeah,
because that felt like that's how it would sound. That's how you would say that, or how he would say that. So I liked that. I liked him at Bumpy's wake when he's talking to, and it was what is his name? Shoot, Joe Morton,
mustache guy.
Played. It was Charlie Williams was the character's actor. Joe Morton. I always think of Joe Morton from
everything. You've seen him in everything.
Yeah,
he's a guy. He's been around.
He has the best look in this because he's the only one that has his hair like parted and combed out of all
and
of
a mustache that is
guys from
definitely
Harlem and
taped on by somebody.
Oh yeah, Now
terrible.
I always think of him as Miles Bennett Dyson from T2. That's
Yep,
like
that's
the
where I
first thing
got
that comes to
it.
mind.
Yeah, and Eureka. He was the scientist in Eureka on Sci-Fi.
Yep, he was also in Eureka. Yeah, yeah. But when he's talking to Frank, and Frank tells him,
Half the people in this room owe bunking money when he died. They think I'm gonna forget to collect, but I'm gonna get that money.
and that is when you know, like, oh, Frank means business. He is,
And
he is coming.
He's Bumpy's driver, and he's the money didn't go away when Bumpy died. It's like, I'm still here, and my job is to get the money from you people, and I'm gonna do it.
Yes, he is.
I love it.
Of course, I'm gonna capture.
My man.
Got to have my man.
Mm-hmm.
It is one of my favorite gifts to use as a reaction too.
That's
that exact
the
one.
black. That's you getting a black spot in Harlem, as when Frank Lucas looks at you and says, "My man." You're like, "Oh crap, I'm gonna die. I don't know when, but I'm gonna die."
Time to make peace because it's all over.
It's all over. Somewhere.
Yep. And the last one is it is the moment that Frank realizes who he's dealing with sitting across the table from Richie. And that scene is not the same as the Pacino De Niro scene in the diner in Heat, because that scene is very much like two dogs circling each other ready to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And this one is not really that same dynamic, but it's the same thing that the movie's trying to do, which is put them across the table from each other. And it was this exchange is when Frank has the realization of, oh, now I know who I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
What can you promise me, Richie?
I can promise you, you lie about one name, you'll never get out of prison. You lie about $1, one offshore account, you'll never get out of prison. Now you can live life rich in jail the rest of your born days, or be poor outside for some of them. That's what I can promise you.
And that's when Frank is like, all right.
Yeah,
well,
that's when he knows he's beaten. It's so good. And I know that this is the kind of scene that actors just love. You know, like acting's a dance. Mm-hmm. It's you playing off your partner and making a scene work, and you're both working hard to give the right reactions at the right time to be in the moment. And you can't be in the moment if somebody else is off somewhere. So you really got to be. And I could see them. They had to love this scene. They had to love that quiet, toned down, back and forth. I would have loved to have been in the room when they shot this. So cool. So cool.
In a movie of so many. Oh, yeah. In a movie of so many moments that are just like, man, that was awesome, or wow, that was effective, that was powerful. That scene puts a bow on all of it and just brings it all to this culminating point. It's masterful filmmaking. It's why I think Ridley Scott is such a good director, because he is able to do this type of thing and bring you along on this journey for 2.5 hours and have these two powerhouses of actors in the same movie, and they don't interact until 2 hours and 20 minutes in, and then they steal it in the last 20 minutes. And it's just it's wonderful. I loved every second of it, and I'm glad that you liked it too.
Loved it. Absolutely. I watched it with Stephanie. She loved it too. It was tough because we didn't realize it was a 2.5 hour movie, and we only have so much time at the end of it. So I'm like, I'm gonna have to watch this in like 3 days. Like, when I watched 3. So I'm really glad I started it like Tuesday of last week. I had to watch lunch on Tuesday, lunch on Wednesday, in the evening on Thursday. Finally got it done.
Now,
it's great.
Now, here's a question that I'm curious about: is Steven today enjoyed this movie? Do you think Steven in 2007 would have had a similar reaction? Maybe not the same, because you're not exactly the same, but do you think you would have enjoyed this movie? Can you put yourself in that frame of mind and think about how you might have reacted to something like this, or would it have seemed a little boring to you back then?
No, I think I would have liked it, because I've always been a movie nerd, and I've always appreciated like movies like this. I think I got into movies like this when I was 15 or 16, and I started watching like Goodfellas and Pulp Fiction and stuff. Like I started getting into the more, thinking man's movies. Like I wasn't as detailed. I mean, I went into college for film. I wanted to make stuff like this, so I'm pretty sure my mind would have enjoyed this plot and how everything went. There's probably certain things that I notice now and I see now that hit me different than they would have 16 years ago? How long can I do math?
Just
That was
about
wild.
November 2nd will be 16 years to the day.
Yeah, I was like 22
since this was released.
I would have enjoyed it, but I'm sure my more mature brain picked up on things differently than it would have then.
Well, I'm so glad that we got to tick this off your list and
this
watch this. Plus, I mean, I just love talking all sorts of stuff with you anyway. That's why we do it roughly every week on Those Were the Days.
Oh yeah, nice plug.
Which we are starting our private investigator shows month. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
So
I can't wait for that. That is a show that Stephen and I do with our friends Amy Frost and Audie Norman, roughly weekly. And you can watch live streams of that over at twitch.tv/twodorkstv. You can subscribe to it as a podcast anywhere you get your podcast. Those Were the Days. That's a great show. You also do one sporadically these days, but you have another one, Horseshoes and Hand Grenades.
Oh yeah, Horseshoes and Hand Grenades. We do. It's on like a weird hiatus, not hiatus, because my co-host has a baby that just seems to love napping on Thursdays, which is the day that we do the show. And if he naps, it means that he's up till like 9:30, and that's not going to work. So I keep having deep conversations with him anytime I say, like, look, kid, I love you, but you have got to stay up on Thursdays, so you go to bed at 7. Do you understand? Don't make mama
The worst
crazy.
part is, if you didn't say anything to him and just switched and said, we're going to start recording it on Tuesday nights just for something different, he would take a nap on Tuesdays.
Yeah, he would mess us up on Tuesdays. So anyway, we've had some heart-to-hearts. He's on a performance improvement plan. We're working on it, but we'll be back.
Good.
It's not like I'm closing down the feed. Horseshoes and Hand Grenades will always be floating in the ether, ready to come back at any given moment. So yeah, that's on Thursdays at 9 if we can pull it off. And it's a fun show. It's a good romp.
Oh, it's
People
so much fun. It is a wonderful show. And if you ever make it to Dragon Con, Steven's there doing panels left and right. You did like how many this year?
Oh, yeah. I did 5 panels this year. I shouted us out at all of them. I was like, listen to Those Were the Days with my buddies Travis, Audie, and Amy. It was good stuff. So that was a blast. I love Dragon Con. And I talked to a lot of people there, and they all said, where's Travis? And I said, I don't know. I'm trying. They all said, Travis belongs here. I said, I know Travis belongs here. We'll get him here.
Well,
don't worry.
The plan is to make it work next year. I am in the early. Luckily, I have enough time that I'm in the early planning stages of getting it all sorted out. But check out Horseshoes and Hand Grenades. Go back, listen to some of the older episodes because they are fun. It is a fun show. The two of you just have a blast.
We do.
And then catch us weekly, and Those Were the Days where we talk old TV. If you like this kind of conversation, this is a lot of what we do. It's just that we also have Audie and Amy there to temper it a little bit and be like, guys,
they're so good.
Let's bring this back to something good.
Being in the room with Audie and Amy just makes you a better podcaster. That's all I know for sure.
Really does. This show, what you haven't seen, I record live Sunday nights right here at twitch.tv/tvstravis, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And comes out as a podcast on Wednesdays, everywhere you get your podcasts, including YouTube, video version there. So if you could drop a subscription on YouTube, subscribe to the channel there, that helps me out quite a bit. So I would appreciate that. Whether you watch on YouTube or not, just the subscription is super helpful. And there's also a Patreon for this show, patreon.com/WYHS. Little as $1 an episode, you get a little bit extra content, monthly movie nights. I'm working on a couple of other projects. There'll be first look stuff there as well. So definitely check that out. If Patreon isn't your thing and you do want to support financially, there's also Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/tvstravis, or just word of mouth, spread word of mouth, tell people about the show. And I appreciate all of that. Next week, I'm going to be talking about Killer Clowns from Outer Space. We're getting close to October, so we're starting to slide into some of the spooky movies. And I found somebody who's never seen Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So Matt Stein is going to come on. We're going to talk about that. And then I also have Brian Dunaway coming up soon. He and I are going to watch a movie I'd never heard of before called The Company of Wolves. That's coming up in the next couple of weeks. So definitely come back for those. That's going to be a ton of fun. Steven, thank you so much for being here tonight. As always, it's a pleasure. And we'll get you back soon because I never get tired of talking movies with you. It's always fun.
It's an absolute blast. Thank you so much for having me, Travis. This was super fun.
Excellent. Until next time, remember to enjoy your movies and let's be excellent to each other. This has been Wait You Haven't Seen.
He loves a big ass, man.